When Colin Chapman started selling advertising space on his cars in 1968, it kind of opened the floodgates, because what was now happening was the costs of running a Formula 1 team were being handed over to advertisers rather than the teams relying on things like starting money and prize money. The cost of running a Formula 1 team at that level had risen to about £100,000, which is well into the millions today when you factor in inflation. But what it had done was that it opened the floodgates, and it meant that the teams front and back could start making more money so long as they found somebody to pay and put logos on the cars. Before the sponsors arrived, the teams got, in addition to the prize money, starting money. This was essentially the teams being paid to race, and the money was handed out based on how much of a draw the teams were. At the Italian Grand Prix, Ferrari would probably get more than Lotus, and that might be reversed at Silverstone or Brands Hatch, with people there to see Jim Clark, with BRM getting a little less with them having Graham Hill and later Jackie Stewart. And Ferrari never turned up to the 1950 British Grand Prix because Enzo had been having a bit of a tiz over the organisers not paying him more than everybody else, but I can't find the actual figures for any of those races. So with sponsors now on the cars, the playing field was levelled. At least sort of. The teams at the front would still be making more money because people would be more willing to pay more money to have their logos on a front-running car. But in turn, it meant that those at the back of the grid wouldn't need to crunch the numbers and run the accounts a bit tighter than they otherwise would. Sponsor money might mean guaranteed income, depending on the deal, and it meant that if they didn't make any prize money or made very little prize money, they weren't losing as much, so could still afford to keep running. While the teams at the front were more commercially viable, in theory, those at the back would remain solvent. So it became a case of, so long as somebody's paying, the teams didn't care which logos ended up on their cars. And in the past, that has been a bit of an issue, because sometimes these sponsors would turn up that would be a bit iffy or straight up scams. T- springs to mind, something that appeared on the Arrows cars in 1999, and more recently the crypto exchange FTX, the logos of which found on the Mercedes cars a couple of years ago as Formula 1 jumped on the crypto bandwagon. As it turned out, FTX was a complete fraud, and its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, is currently serving 25 years in federal prison over the bits and pieces involving FTX and Alameda Research. But I'm not smart enough to understand all this crypto stuff. CoffeeZilla is probably a better port of call for that. But I did a video years ago on the whole scam sponsors in Formula 1, like I already said, T- and also Moneytron and people like that. But I was talking to some people on Discord the other day, and I had to go through some old videos to clarify some facts and figures and bits and pieces like that. And I saw some of the pictures of the cars in the video, and I saw some of the models that I used to sort of describe the cars and the liveries and bits and pieces like that. And I'm looking at some of the sponsors on those cars and thinking, what the hell do you actually make? And just as a bit of general housekeeping here, there is no what about here. There's no but you forgot, and there's certainly no why didn't you mention. This is just a small selection to get things going, and if there is enough demand or enough people shouting enough companies at me, I could make another one. But if I haven't mentioned the one that you were thinking of or were hoping to see mentioned, then, well, I didn't mention it. It's as simple as that. Nothing was forgotten, nothing was ignored. So what I thought I'd do is I'd start off simple and then sort of go with the flow from there as I start to think of different things in my moon-sized head. Now the first one is a sponsor that was on cars a lot during the 80s, well, one team during the 80s, but then it came back in the 90s before disappearing altogether. Parmalat. Now put simply, Parmalat is an Italian dairy company that was founded in 1961 that specialises in UHT milk. Now UHT means ultra high temperature, which translates to long life. Today I learned. But Parmalat is commonly associated with the Brabham team, as they were a long-time partner of Bernie's outfit. And yes, I said Bernie, because by the time Parmalat came on board with them, Bernie Ecclestone owned Jack's old squad. Parmalat first appeared on Brabhams in the late 1970s, with my image searching putting it around the 1978 season when Brabham brought the BT46 to the championship. And Niki Lauda. So yeah, Niki brought it over from Ferrari. Now this is when Brabham was partnered with Alfa Romeo, so you had the red cars adorned with these massive Parmalat logos for that season and beyond. And with Niki Lauda behind the wheel, Parmalat was given much more coverage with the then two-time champion, and got even more coverage still when Brabham brought the infamous and controversial fan car to the series. It won one race and was then voluntarily banned by Bernie. I would love to get some time up close with that car for a video. Parmalat's sponsorship continued with Brabham into the turbo era, and the white logos on those blue cars have sort of become quite the iconic livery. By the time 1983 rolled around, Fila, the sporting goods company, had become the title sponsor, but Parmalat logos were still painted onto the sides and the rear wings. In 1984 they became Motor Racing Developments International, so sort of reverting back to their old name, and in 1985 the Parmalat logos were replaced with Olivetti logos. Olivetti being an Italian computer company. But the logos came back in the 1990s because of quite the intricate sponsorship deal. This is actually genius. When Pedro Diniz joined the Formula 1 grid in 1995 with 40, his driving career was funded mostly because his dad owned one of Brazil's biggest chains of supermarkets, Ascher, I think that's how it's pronounced. The way it worked was, when Diniz was being signed up to 40, his dad was in charge of signing up the sponsors because of his business ties. And Diniz Sr. purposely went after companies whose products he could sell in his supermarkets, and any of the companies that signed on with 40 would then get preferential placement so that they could then, in theory, sell more product. As such, Parmalat was one of those companies, and Diniz took Parmalat to Ligier, Arrows and Sauber after his single season with 40. Parmalat went bust in 2003. It appears that they overexpanded and that pushed them further into money problems, and Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi had to change bankruptcy laws to help companies get saved once they entered administration. On top of that, one of the bosses was then arrested when the administrators found an €8 billion black hole in the accounts. The company was saved and is now part of a French company called Lactalis. And staying with Arrows and Diniz, there was a sponsor on the Arrows cars in 1997 and 1998 that, to this day, I've still wondered about, but I no longer have to wonder about because I figured out what they did, or do. A slight spoiler alert there, but that company is Danka. Not the German word for thank you, but Danka, spelled D-A-N-K-A. It's a computer business systems company that was based in London and had been running since 1973. At the end of the 1996 season, Tom Walkinshaw, who was now the owner of the Arrows team, had signed up 1996 champion-elect Damon Hill and also signed up Pedro Diniz to help pay for Damon and the team. Coming up to either just before or just after Christmas 1996, Walkinshaw unveiled Arrow's new title sponsor, which was revealed to be Danka. And Danka's logos took pride of place on a car that was visually striking, if a bit iffy on performance and reliability. The Danka logos were also accompanied by the logos of the cosmetics arm of the company Zepter, and accents of red because of Power Horse, an energy drink that had sponsored Footwork the previous year. Danka would follow through with their sponsorship into 1998, when the Arrows car was an all-black affair, with any colour simply coming from the white logos stuck on the cars. But at the end of 1998 that sponsorship deal had ended, because, like Parmalat, Danka had run into money problems. The internet is a magical place, because once I worked out who the hell Danka were, I found an article from the Guardian newspaper dated 1999. The newspaper called Danka a warning to stupid investors, because during 1996, just before they signed on with Arrows, Danka had bought out Kodak's photocopying business, and after a profit warning, the share prices tanked. In turn, debts kicked in, and insolvency was on the horizon, because Danka had taken out several loans where the terms and conditions were seen by the company as being advisory. In 1996, their share price was about £9. By 1999, the share price was a measly 79 pence. Somehow, they got through it, but the company collapsed last year. And speaking of money being so funny, yeah, these segues are getting a bit out of hand, but one that pops up when I'm covering some of the stuff from the 1970s and into the early 1980s is, hang on, why have they got Abba on the car? Is that the band? How does that even work? Well, in the early 1980s, there was a Swedish driver on the grid called Slim Borgudd, who was quite clearly a racing driver given that he was in a Formula 1 car, but normally he was busy being a Grammy Award-winning drummer, who was mates with Benny Andersson and Bjorn Ulvaeus, the two Bs in Abba. Annie Fried, Bjorn, Benny, Agneta. Abba. It's like Arrows and March, but with music I just cannot get into. Look, you might like Abba. Your mum might like Abba. Your nan might like Abba. But I don't. It's just one of those bands that I just can't get into. And if you like Abba, that's fine. I mean, my favourite band is the Bare Naked Ladies. it's opinions, it's tastes, it's subjective, it's like food or colour or smells or sounds. It's just one of those things, isn't it? But I don't know, it might just stem from GCSE music, where I was constantly told that Abba is the greatest band that ever lived, but I digress. The thing is, sponsorships usually imply money changed hands. In this case, it didn't. The reason Slim got a drive in the first place is because he scraped together enough money to buy his way into the ATS team that was on its arse, because everybody had walked out besides 2 mechanics. And he managed to convince Roger Heavens, his old F3 boss, to join up and bring some mechanics, and the team was saved. The Abba thing was simply a bit of free publicity for the band and for Slim. This was now the 1980s. Disco music was dead, thank God, and Abba was starting a decline in fortunes, with the 4 members, now 2 married couples, heading for divorce. So there was the thinking that by saying this guy is part of one of the biggest bands in the world would be something that might entice in more sponsors. He scored a single point at the 1981 British Grand Prix before moving to Tyrrell for 1982, but the money had dried up. He did find some success in truck racing though. Unfortunately, there are no other puns that I can use to segue into the next bit. I was going to use the term drum and race, but Motorsport magazine beat me to it. Moving on. Mission Winnow is a bit of a weird one, and it's also the most recent one on this. Well, I don't want to say list because that implies that this is a list video and I've run out of ideas, but when Mission Winnow came out, nobody was quite sure what it actually was, what they made, or if it was even real simply because of the name. The name alone didn't seem real. It seemed like something made up in an unlicensed game, or a fake name that you'd see on a police procedural to stand in for a real company that they can't use. So Hondo's SWAT team raids a company called Mission Winnow, or Benson and Stabler arrest the executive of Mission Winnow, or NCIS investigates a weapons contractor called Mission Winnow. And it was made even vaguer when the company's website simply said that it was committed to constant development and was a change lab focused on reframing conversations and sparking open debate. The development of what exactly, and what exactly are they debating? Is this the James O'Brien show? I mean, nobody knew what Mission Winnow was about until the media started doing some digging. It appeared that Mission Winnow was simply a front for Philip Morris International. Essentially, what Mission Winnow was trying to do was skirt around the tobacco bans, because you can't advertise Marlboro or any other tobacco brands anymore. Since around 2005, 2006 or so, tobacco logos were effectively deleted from the sport, and the teams all parted ways with their tobacco sponsors, save for Ferrari, who continued to use the barcode and other methods of getting around these bans, with only Monaco, Bahrain and China being the only places where they could show the full branding in 2007. And that barcode logo came under more scrutiny in 2009 or 2010 because a group of UK doctors suggested to the courts that this constituted subliminal advertising, which is illegal in the UK and most other countries. And if you go onto the Wikipedia page for subliminal stimuli, the accompanying picture to sort of illustrate some subliminal stimuli is a 2010 Ferrari Formula 1 car. But as Jalopnik reported in their article, simply and accurately titled, "What the f*** is Mission Winnow?", a federal judge had found in 2006 that cigarette companies had known for years that their products were addictive and harmful, and that they continued to make false and misleading statements while hiding the true information from the public, while at the same time shutting down projects and labs to ensure secrecy. Go to Mission Winnow's Twitter page and you'll find that it's filled with linked influencer level tosh about stuff. It looks like somebody used ChatGPT to write some deep, insightful quotes. Then they got in trouble with the subliminal advertising watchdogs again. When the logos were applied to the cars for the start of the 2019 season, there were reports coming from Australia where it was suggested they might have to take the logos off. Much like in Europe, tobacco advertising is incredibly strict in Australia, and the watchdogs there had seen that the Mission Winnow logo, when shrunk down to its MW monogram, looked suspiciously like a chevron on its side. A chevron that was also used to advertise, Marlboro cigarettes? Autosport then reported in the early March of 2019 that the Australians would be looking into things, reiterating the allegations that the Mission Winnow logos on the cars looked similar to those used on Ferraris when Marlboro first became a sponsor of the team back in, the 80s, I think. McLaren, at the same time, had signed a deal with BAT to do the whole A Better Tomorrow thing that was also being looked at by the Australians. because of that grey area with e-cigarettes and vaping. Are vapes a stop smoking aid and can then be put on the car as such, or is it just an alternative to smoking? But the funny thing is, Jalopnik quoted so much of what Philip Morris was saying, and it was amazing that with so much wordage, they could say so little. It's frankly inspirational. They even have an FAQ on their website, and none of the answers actually give an answer. The people at Mission Winnow could be politicians. I know this was something to explain some of the sponsors in F1, but this one... yeah, I've got nothing here. So I'll do one final one before I wrap everything up, and that is whatever that company was on Michael Schumacher's hat. It turns out that Schumacher's hat with the long name on it that you can't pronounce is a Frankfurt company that loosely translates to German Wealth Advisors, and it was founded in 1975. DV, as we'll just call it from now on, rakes in about €2 billion a year, and their total portfolio at the minute is something in the region of €250 billion. That's a lot. But the partnership with the Michael started in 1996, and as of 2016, that partnership is still going, with DV setting up the Michael Schumacher exhibition in Marburg to celebrate 20 years of that sponsorship relationship, which saw their hats win 5 world championships in a row from 2000 to 2004. As well as sponsoring Mick Schumacher, the company has begun a relationship with former Liverpool and Borussia Dortmund manager Jurgen Klopp and Sophia Flörsch. For most of us though, DV is that long name on Schumacher's hat. In a time before we could just have a quick Google, it was fun to try and pronounce what was on it, or read what was on it. I never understood it, and none of my family speaks German, so it was always one of those things. But that was the fun thing pre-internet, is that you would look at the logos on the sides of the cars and wonder what it was that was being advertised. It must have been a local company, but others around the world probably didn't have a single clue as to what it was. And it kind of ruins the mystique now, just being able to simply Google it, but that does have its advantages, because you can go back through the 90s, the 80s and the 70s, look at a car, look at a logo, Google them, and find out what it was they were making, or what they are still making, and find out how they might have got linked with that team in the first place. But if there are other companies that you've looked at in the past and gone, well, who the hell are they? Do leave them down in the comments, and maybe there'll be a part 2. So then, a little look at some sponsors that made you go, what the hell is it you make exactly? And if this has been a little bit interesting for you, then do leave a like so I know a good job was done. And for more stuff like this, get subscribed and also get the bell on so you never miss out on anything else I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the mad lads at Patreon who continue to support me at a more personal level. And if you want to help out with things around here, a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and other bits and bobs you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks if you just want to buy me a coffee, and memberships for Patreon without the Patreon. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.